All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to This Explainer. Back in February 2026, a simmering, decades-long rivalry between two incredibly powerful nations suddenly erupted into devastating open war. Almost overnight, we saw missiles lighting up the night sky over Iran, an entire regional power's leadership wiped out in a matter of hours, and the world's most critical oil choke point transformed into a terrifying battlefield. So today, we're going to map out exactly how we got here, and honestly, what this all means for all of us. Okay, let's dive in. Here's our roadmap for The Explainer today. We're going to cover the road to war, the first strike, how the region ignites, the global price, and finally, where things stand today. Section 1. The road to war. The events leading up to February 2026. Now, while historical tensions between the United States and Iran really trace back decades, the immediate spark for this specific catastrophic conflict was Iran's nuclear program. To understand the breaking point, we just have to trace the timeline a bit. Things really began to unravel after the 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal ultimately collapsed. Fast forward to April 2025. Talks between Washington and Tehran restarted, bringing this glimmer of hope for a new agreement. But this was happening exactly as Iran was engaged in a violent crackdown on anti-government protests at home. And by January 2026, those negotiations were completely faltering. The response to that was massive. The United States initiated the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 Iraq invasion. We're talking aircraft carriers and literally hundreds of planes quietly but very deliberately moving into striking position. Section 2. The first strike. February 28th, 2026. So this right here is the exact ignition point where diplomacy completely ended and open warfare began. I want you to think about that number for a second. 900. Just to really grasp the sheer scale and intensity of this initial assault. On February 28th, US and Israeli forces unleashed a torrent of nearly 900 airstrikes. And they didn't do this over a month or even a week. They launched these 900 strikes in just 12 hours. Absolutely staggering. The precision of those 12 hours was, frankly, devastating. The strikes methodically wiped out Iran's missile systems and completely crippled their air defenses. But it was the targeting of military leadership that sent an immediate, massive shockwave across the globe. Among the dozens of top officials killed in that bombardment was Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. In literally half a day, the command structure of a major regional power was fundamentally altered. Naturally, a strike of this magnitude immediately divided the world. Washington framed the strikes as an absolute necessity, acting to definitively stop Iran from building a nuclear weapon while also responding to the regime's brutal crackdown on its own people. But on the other side, you had a loud coalition of critics, human rights groups, and several foreign governments fiercely condemning the action. They labeled it a clear war of aggression, arguing that the justifications provided by Washington simply did not hold up to international scrutiny. Section 3. The region ignites. How a targeted strike becomes a regional war. Actions like this, they rarely stay confined. And Iran definitely did not stay silent. Step 1 was that devastating US and Israeli strike we just talked about. But moving to Step 2, Iran immediately retaliated. They launched massive missile and drone attacks on Israel, US military bases, and Gulf Arab states allied with Washington. And by Step 3, the fire had truly spread like wildfire. Lebanon's Hezbollah entered the fight, ripping open an entirely new front. Within mere days, nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait found themselves drawn directly into the conflict after Iranian strikes landed right on their sovereign territory. Now, right in the middle of all the chaos of this expanding regional war, a particularly striking micro-narrative unfolded at sea. An Iranian frigate, which was actually returning from an unrelated naval exercise, was intercepted and sunk by a U.S. Navy submarine. 104 sailors died in those waters. And what's wild about this is, not only was this the first submarine kill in active combat by any nation since the Falklands War, but it was the very first time an American submarine had sunk in enemy vessels since World War II. Section 4. The global price. The economic shockwave. The reality of modern conflict is that it never just stays on the battlefield, right? Very quickly, the shockwaves rushed outward, directly impacting the entire global economy. And the main reason for that is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a narrow maritime passage, sure, but it carries a staggering 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply. As the war escalated, Iran threatened and directly attacked commercial ships trying to navigate this vital choke point. The immediate result? Global shipping had to be massively rerouted, and commercial flights all across the Middle East were completely grounded. So this geopolitical crisis happening thousands of miles away suddenly connects directly to something you probably drive past every single day. With the Strait of Hormuz under fire and global oil markets basically panicking, we saw a massive surge at the pump. By mid-2026, U.S. gas prices had spiked by roughly 30% compared to pre-war levels. And the economic toll at the pump? That's really only a fraction of the story. By June of 2026, which was just 4 months into the conflict, the direct cost of this war to American taxpayers had already reached an estimated $113 billion. That is just a staggering financial burden for a war with absolutely no clear horizon. Section 5, where things stand today. The ongoing stalemate and human toll. So here we are in mid-July 2026, and we're essentially trapped in this tragic cycle of failed diplomacy. It's really fallen into a rhythm of ceasefire, collapse, repeat. In April, a brief 2-week ceasefire completely broke down over strikes in Lebanon and the escalating standoff in the Strait of Hormuz. Then in June, there was a real glimmer of hope. A memorandum to actually end the war was signed by President Trump in Versailles and Iran's President Pezeshkian in Tehran. But it just failed to hold. By early July, the U.S. reimposed a strict naval blockade, Iran struck commercial tankers again, and just this week, the U.S. conducted 5 consecutive days of strikes on Iranian military sites. But we have to remember, behind every single piece of geopolitical strategy and every economic statistic, there are human lives. The civilian toll since February has been completely heartbreaking. We've seen hospitals forced to evacuate highly vulnerable patients because strikes were landing right outside their doors. Innocent commercial ship crews, people just trying to do their jobs, have been killed or gone missing at sea. In total, thousands of casualties, both military and civilian, have been reported across multiple sides of this conflict. So the crucial point right now is understanding the absolute deadlock we are currently trapped in this mid-July. President Trump is threatening to escalate things even further by striking Iranian power plants and bridges if Tehran refuses to negotiate. Meanwhile, Iran firmly states it has absolutely no plans to come to the table as long as the crushing U.S. naval blockade remains on its ports. Neither side is blinking, and the world's entire oil supply is literally hanging in the balance. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly pressing question. A strike that was initially meant to last weeks has now stretched well past 4 months. It's totally reshaped international alliances, upended global oil markets, and shattered lives across the Middle East. So, with the blockades holding totally firm and diplomatic talks completely frozen, what actually breaks this stalemate? The truth is, this story is still unfolding right in front of us, and the end is nowhere in sight. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.